Okay, now this page is going to be, I entitled this page, What Can One Expect After They Read the Bible Through? Like, what can they expect to happen in their lives? Okay, it's hard to identify, but I'm going to try. Now, I began by mentioning about over the years we are subjected to so many ideas. Okay, call them emergent, call them evangelical, whatever we want to call them. So many ideas coming from the church. You wonder, do these ideas really work in our lives? Again, these ideas are taken from hopscotching all over the Bible, picking verses from here and there, cherry picking verses from the Bible. Okay, and we could make any principle we want out of them. But when we're faced with serious issues in our life, like a loss of a job, a loss of a loved one, divorce, um, or an illness, you know, do the principles we're really learning, do they work? You see, when I was growing up, we did these short devotionals. We didn't have time to read the Bible, so we did 1 or 2 minute devotionals, and we thought, well, this was enough to get us through. And then other times we would get sermon series. We'd go to church on Sunday morning, and he'd be going through these series of messages, okay, and in hopes that it would help our lives and all that. But I wondered, did it really help when the troubles really came to our lives? You see, because of all this, when we started hearing about this relationship with God, did it really make any sense to us? Okay? So here's just a few things that happened to me when I first started reading the Bible. Within the first 3 months, I knew something wasn't right. I was getting all these verses put back into context, and now they're making so much sense, whereas before they never really made sense. Um, Within 6 months of reading the Bible, I started to realize we didn't even understand what John 3:16 meant, and that's one of the most popular verses in the Bible, and we didn't even understand that. We all thought we did, but truly, when you read it in context, we didn't. See, I thought when I first started reading it that I just wanted to at least once in my life go through the Bible. But when I started seeing all the inconsistencies, in other words, in comparing what the Bible said to to how I was raised, it was very eye-opening. Something else that happens midway through, like 6 months after you reading the Bible, you begin to wonder where some of our ideas came from. Okay, like we were taught to raise our hands and accept Jesus into our hearts. Okay, who wants to become a Christian? I see that hand out there. Okay, and you ask yourself, where did that come from? Because it's surely not in the Bible. So where did it come from? There are answers to that question. And I put some links and some messages on this blog over there in the favorite links section that could help out with that. Paul Washer has a good video to that. Maybe I'll attach that to somehow to this video. But it's over there in the favorite links section. Now, there are some not so good things to expect when reading the Bible through the first time. After you get through it, okay, you might begin to develop a critical spirit, okay? When that happens, now it's really time to pray hard. Ask God to deal with the critical spirit, because you'll find yourself being critical of other, leaders and churches and the way things go down. And we need to be very, very careful how we discuss this topic of church, and we need to be very careful with this, because the Bible does say clearly that the church is very dear to God's heart. But in this, I always make a distinction. We're Americans in this 21st culture, in this 21st century, okay? And I always make that distinction, because the way we have been brought up in this culture, it has created mass confusion, to be sure. So becoming critical is not necessarily a totally bad thing, but being overly critical, which can happen, now that is a bad thing. Because we need to be very careful about how we discern people who have different views than our own. Okay, it's serious stuff on that. So when we have that critical spirit, we need to really pray hard about that, and God will replace that critical spirit with with His understanding, and this will deepen your relationship with God, and finally that will mean something. And just remember, all of this confusion comes about because of how we take verses out of their context and make up ideas. And like we make up ideas like, these seeker-friendly churches. It all depends on who's doing the seeking. Okay, we've mixed that one up. We've definitely mixed that up. Who's doing the seeking? You see, this is one reason why I don't pass along a lot of single verses to make a point. If I say something, I'll say, well, it says in Revelation, or it says in Ephesians, and then you go and you search the scriptures, okay? Because it was noted to me one time, people used to search the scriptures. Now we just look up verses that someone else taught us, okay? And there's a difference, okay? When you're searching the scriptures, you've got this question in your mind and you really want the answer, and you're going to search out the scriptures and find it, and it takes time to do that. But if you just look up a scripture, okay, then, it still has its benefits, but it's just a different approach. It creates a whole different mindset. I guess a good analogy there would be in my business, we used to use, a long time ago, we used to use maps to look up where we were going. Now, I travel the country, so we use maps, and we'd plan, and we'd search out things, and we would that would take some time to do that if I'm driving here to the West Coast, okay. But today, okay, there's a much simpler way. Just tap in our GPSs, and away we go, and in 5 seconds you can go, okay. And so we don't take the time anymore. It's an analogy that I use because it's just I travel around a lot. So, but it's the same thing as we search the scriptures. But now we just, somebody gives us a verse, we quick look it up, there it is, boom, and we put it in, and we think that we did study. Okay, we think that we did study because we looked up a couple of verses. Now we don't have time, I understand, to do all this research that a lot of people do. I understand that. But we are still called to examine the things we read and listen to. Okay? That's even in the Bible, to test everything and to examine everything. So I don't pass along single verses anymore. If somebody wants to know something, they can find it. I guess I can mention here something else that happens after we've read the Bible through is we don't, right now we just think in our lives from when we were born till now, okay? But after reading the Bible, you begin to think in terms of generations, okay? What's happened over the generations of time. And you begin, that's an interesting thing that happened. I didn't foresee that one coming, okay? In other words, what affected me? What generation affect, and all the changes through the generations, okay? That's hard to describe here, but that's a whole different way of thinking, because how we got to this point, we need to look at the cultures that were before us and think about the generations that are, younger than us, that are coming up. How are we going to talk to them? That's a major concern of mine. So again, I'll mention again that I began questioning about where all this asking Jesus in our heart came from, and raising your hand and all that stuff, making a decision for Christ and coming forward and all that. And I think it's a case, and I wrote in there, in this case of making a decision, if that gets removed from its holder, which is the Bible, when you take that out of its context, okay, and it gets focused on and overemphasized and way overemphasized, and week after week, a strange pattern begins to develop from that, or maybe a strange mindset is more like it. And when we think this way, the whole concept of salvation gets lost. we get to the point where we're looking for, we look for answers to questions and we get them, but those answers just lead to more questions, okay? And that cycle just never stops. So we need to be really careful when we're going through the Bible, because it's just once you get a question of yours answered, then it raises more questions, and you need answers for them. And that's okay. Just keep searching. God will reveal it to you. And I guess the final thing that happens when we read the Bible through is we lose some of that Christianese language. Okay, the things that so many Christians are noted for saying. I could cite many examples, but I think we know, there's so we lose all the Christianese language, and be prepared. People are going to judge you and call you critical, and it's going to be hard for a while, okay? But it's well worth it. It's well worth reading the Bible in context, putting these verses that were taken out of context, putting them back where they belong. And there's a lot of side effects to this, but joy, unspeakable joy, awaits the one that does, okay? Because our joy is in eternity. Our hope is for an eternal home, okay? This life in this world, there's not much in this world, and God will restore this. Okay, and that's where our peace and our joy lie. It's an eternity. So that's it for this page. And okay, thank you for listening, and blessings.